So the next dish that we're going to make, again, on the same kind of topic of experiencing, lighter on the tummy, right? So when someone after bladder cancer treatment might experience loose stools, diarrhea, and really focusing on those low fiber foods, okay? So this dish is great because we're going to do a little bit more of a pasta using a type of flour, semolina, which is great because it is a little bit higher in protein and lower in fiber. Okay, so it's a low residue, so it is in line. We're going to add in, so we're making it from scratch, so that's fun. And we're going to add in some other vegetables in order to create that color, but it certainly could be more of a plain dish and to have something just like easy peasy with a little bit of olive oil, and salt and pepper type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I will say with caveat, you do not have to make pasta from scratch to enjoy this dish, like Steph mentioned. But we figured, you know what? Why don't we show you? This is a fun little technique, and this particular type of pasta dough, the semolina flour dough, is one that is a little bit easier to make from scratch. Zena, have you ever made pasta from scratch?
A few times.
Beautiful, fantastic. And is it usually with egg? Like, is it an egg style or?
Yes, usually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done that as well, but what I like about this one is, again, the simplicity of it. So this is we're just using water and a little bit of olive oil. So we have here our semolina, and this is durum wheat. This is a type of durum wheat. And what you want to find is, again, this is available in almost every grocery store, but sometimes it's labeled as semolina, sometimes it's labeled as fine ground durum wheat. Okay, so that is what you want to look for. So about 1.5 cups of that. And then we're going to add some water to this, about 1/2 cup. So 1.5 cups of the flour to about 1/2 cup of water. And like most dishes, most of these Italian dishes, it's done by eye. It's done by hand, right? Well, I'll give you the measurements, but it's more of the feel, as they say. So we're going to use about 1 teaspoon of olive oil here as well. And just a small pinch of salt. So that's it. That's all it takes for the ingredients. And then what I'm going to do is, you can definitely old school style, do it straight on the cutting board, try to carefully catch the liquid from escaping off the side. But if you want to make it a little bit safer, we could just do this in a bowl. And what I'm doing is with the fork, I'm just gradually bringing in a little bit of that flour into the center. And I'm working my way around just until it becomes a little bit easier to handle. And so once I start to see these sort of shreds, then I know that I can get in with my hands. And this is when it starts to get fun. And so what we're going to, yeah, go ahead, Steph.
Well, I was just going to ask, Zena, you mentioned that, right after your surgery, carbs were your friend. I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit what that looked like for you. What were your go-tos?
Sure. So, especially during chemo, one of the biggest side effects that I was dealing with was the nausea. I constantly felt very nauseous. And what seemed to help was just plain carbs, like, white bagels and pasta, and just even sometimes I found that in order to start the day off less nauseous, before I even got out of bed, my husband would make me a bagel and leave it on my nightstand so that I would actually start eating before I sat up in bed. And that seemed to settle my stomach and help me get through the day. These are some of the things that, as a peer support volunteer at Bladder Cancer Canada, when I'm talking to people who've been newly diagnosed or they're going through their treatment, again, it's things that we sort of found that helped us, and it might help some people, it might not, but we're always happy to share that type of information. And that's one of the resources available at Bladder Cancer Canada, is that one-to-one peer support. It's often a phone call, emails, whatever works for people, and to provide the information that they're looking for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And that's definitely in line with the recommendations that, you know, I see with patients. So yes, nausea is one of those things that people experience. And of course, yes, the plain carbohydrate seems to help manage the nausea. And actually, you know, we see that often, like, it's kind of this vicious cycle. So you're nauseous, so you don't eat, but that actually makes you more nauseous. So yes, I mean, having somebody give you a nice warm bagel is awesome, but even having like soda crackers that are salted next to your bed, or bread, or, you know, again, something that's different. You might, you know, eating well looks different for everyone, and when you're nauseous, that's something that can be really, really helpful. Other times we recommend separating fluids with your solid meals. So sometimes, like, having a soup that's, you know, rich in proteins and stuff like that might not work. So really just separating the fluids from the solid foods. And even the temperature of foods sometimes could kind of be triggering. So people say that they prefer things that are at room temperature instead of like really hot. And again, that can also have an effect with like the smell and the aroma, because that can make someone more nauseous. So, you know, sometimes a fish dish might not be the most pleasant for someone experiencing nausea. But, you know, obviously, like opening up the windows or using a pot to cover the food can definitely help as well. So those are some things around nausea that I just wanted to put forth for people to know that. Again, I always emphasizing that eating well looks different, especially when you are going through cancer-related symptoms. And as Zina probably can attest to, it's a little bit of a mind game because we're not used to eating like that, or kind of accepting that, you know, that's the proper way of eating. Although there is no one way of eating, so it really looks different for everybody.
So what I did here is I've just been kneading the dough. So after I formed it into those sort of shreds, what you're going to do is sort of pull it across the cutting board and then bring it back into itself like this, okay? And so you're using sort of the palm of your hand to kind of stretch and pull it back into itself. And what this is doing is it's forming the structure, right? It's sort of activating the gluten to make it nice and strong, which is what we want for this type of pasta. Okay, so it doesn't take too long, like about 5 minutes or so of kneading, just until you get to a point where it's nice and smooth. Okay, and then if I pressed it with my finger, I don't know how easy that is to see, but if I pressed it with my finger, it should bounce back. Okay, it should not leave an indentation. It should be nice and springy. And that's when we know it's good to go. This we can wrap up in some cling film and then just let it rest for like 30 minutes. You can put it in the fridge. You can do this in advance. You can leave it in the fridge, you know, for a day or two. If you want to keep it longer, this freezes exceptionally well. So you can make a bigger batch, freeze some of the pasta dough in the freezer, and then defrost it when you need it. Now this type of dough, again, we didn't use eggs, and this is was typically made in regions of Italy when they didn't have eggs, right? So they would just use water, and maybe they were probably growing this durum wheat in that region, and that's where you would get it. So there's probably many regions. I know Molise has, this is a very common pasta dough from Molise, and we are going to now, so this one's done, it's been refrigerated, and we're gonna make our different shapes now. It's ready to sort of roll out. So for this one, we're going to make cavatelli pasta. But this, you can make all different types with this dough, you can make all different types of shapes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it into little manageable slices. And I'm just going to roll it almost like you're playing with plasticine or molding clay again. And so we're just going to roll it out just into like these little thin logs, about the diameter of like a pencil, like a typical, number 2 writing pencil, just like this, into these little ropes, right? And then we're going to cut these into little pillows. So you can use your knife. And again, depending on the shape, like if you had a pasta machine, you can definitely roll this out into like thinner sheets. But for the type of noodle that we're going to make, we want to cut them into these little tiny little pillows. And I'll do the same with this piece. And again, if you have people around the house, kids, this is always a fun little activity to get everyone into. Just like this, perfect. And then we're going to cut it. Steph, you started practicing this one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Doing it right with you.
All right, so we cut them into these little pillows just like this. And now you can shape these whichever way you want. I think traditionally, and we probably have a cavatelli expert on the line. I think I saw a comment before, but what we would do is just take your thumb and you're going to press it in to that pillow and drag it across the cutting board just until you get this little sort of shell. And yeah, and this would sort of trap the sauce that you would make. And usually, I think traditionally, it's probably just a tomato sauce. It's a tomato sauce, but obviously you can do it with whatever you want. And so again, just thumb inside, drag across the cutting board, and then you get this little concave shape.
And I'll just add that like tomato sauce is tomatoes, right? But again, when somebody's experiencing diarrhea, they want something that's lower in residue, lower in fiber. And so a sauce, generally the seeds of the skin of the tomato are blanched and, taken off. So that tomato sauce is quite nutritious, right? Because it's still giving you the lycopene and the different like vitamin A, vitamin C, the different nutrients that are important to, a variety of vegetables and fruits. So again, it looks a little bit different, but you certainly can continue to get the variety of color from vegetables and fruit in your diet, but just in a different way. So tomato sauce would be a great way to, enjoy the pasta. And we know, a lot of people always ask me, should I take like my vegetables or fruit, or vegetables rather, is it better to have it raw or cooked? And I always say it depends. And the reason is, well, A, eating well looks different for everybody, right? So if you are experiencing diarrhea, you do want to have things that are cooked, right? Because that's going to be softer on the tummy. The other thing is that it depends because each nutrient might be a little bit higher when it's raw versus cooked. And tomatoes are that perfect example. So when they're raw, you're getting more vitamin A, and when they're cooked, you're getting more lycopene. Both are very, very important. So kind of getting the, the mix, obviously you could get it in different foods, but the lycopene is really found in those bright red colors like watermelon, papaya, and it's an important nutrient that you want to make sure that you're getting through your diet.
Perfect. So we've done a few by hand and just using our thumb as a tool, but then you can get creative and you can use some of the different shapes and textures that you have around the house. So here I just have the back of a fork. And I'm going to do that same motion with my thumb into the back of the fork and create that still little shell concave shape. But now I have these like nice little ridges on the outside, which, I mean, they look fun for sure, but they're used to sort of grab, again, the sauce that you add it to. right? So again, on that fork, sort of roll down. And if you find that it does stick a bit, just add a little bit more of the semolina. Or you can get one of these little boards, these little gnocchi boards, which are awesome. I've found these on Amazon for like $8. They're really, really great. And they have these little ridges in there. So you can take that same little pasta pillow and just roll it, press it into the board. And there we go. The ridges on that come out much more pronounced. Really, really cool. And that's it. So you can spend the afternoon. I'm not going to make you wait here the entire time watching me just roll this pasta, but this is, again, it's a nice little fun activity. And we're going to make our pasta, and then you can, as you make them, if you're making a lot, what I would do is get like a little sheet, a little plate, and then just cover it with a dish towel, just so it sort of prevents it from drying out. But you can make this, if you want them a little harder, you can even make this a day in advance, no problem, and just let these shells dry out. Or you can make them fresh. So that's what we're going to do now. And I'm going to put this in our boiling water, and this will take like 5 minutes. Doesn't take long. You want to test as you go. But in that time that it cooks, we're going to whip up our quick little sauce. So that's going to go in our boiling water. Now, Zena, what are some of your, I guess, favorite sauces or dressings for pasta?
Well, you can't beat a fresh tomato sauce. That's just sort of the best one. But I am a big fan of just experimenting, and oftentimes it'll be like just an olive oil based sauce with whatever. If I have some prosciutto in the house, or throw in some olives, throw in some sun-dried tomatoes. I love just throwing in some different things that are available, and you can't go wrong with pasta.
No, there's so many options. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a little, I was inspired by some of the greens. Try not to show you too much of my messy kitchen. Just going to get up here. There we go. It's good enough. So I was inspired by some of the greens, obviously coming out now, some of the more seasonal vegetables that we're seeing. And so we're going to whip together this really nice sort of creamy green sauce, kind of like a pesto. And using, again, just what we found. So we had some really nice fresh spinach in the store. We had some kale. Now the kale is obviously going to be a little bit rougher, right, Steph? This is cruciferous vegetable.
Yeah, I was going to say, with these greens, again, if one is experiencing like quite a bit of diarrhea, you want to stick to something really basic, like Zena said, like some olive oil, salt, pepper, maybe you add in a few vegetables depending on what you could tolerate. Something more green that is a little bit more residue, and that might be something that you can tolerate. So even cooking the spinach or the kale first, that's great too. I guess, Zena, like, what do you experience now? Have you found that, you're okay having more of that spinach and kale, years later?
I do find that. So as I said, I'm 10 years out. So I do find that my body has adapted. I can consume quite a bit of fiber and without a lot of ill effect. But and I'm grateful for that, because that's sort of the way I enjoyed eating, and it signals to me that things do return to normal. And that's, for a cancer survivor, returning to normal is both important physically, but also psychologically as well too. So
Totally. Yeah. And so, I think it's really reassuring for people to know that eating well looks different, and it could be for a short amount of time or some time. And like I said, like, the body does adapt. And so, for some people, returning to what they ate before treatment works. I do know that for other people, that's not the case, right? So it's just kind of like you said, just being prepared and knowledgeable, but knowing that, it's important, and having those variety in your diet, and, being able to having I don't want to say a higher residue, but, a amount of fiber back in the diet is great.
So what we did is we actually blanched all these greens. Okay, so what that means is boiling water. You can put a little pinch of salt in there, and we're going to cook them down just until a little bit softer. This is just going to make the sauce a lot creamier in this case. And for things like asparagus or things that have a peel like this, and again, just in season, starting to see some nice Ontario asparagus, is beautiful. What I've done was I just took a peeler to the outside, right? So if you're okay with the peel and the skin, you can definitely add that, but we just peeled it on the outside, and the blanching is just going to make it a little bit softer, and it's going to puree a lot better that way. So that goes into a little bit of boiling water, like 60 seconds. Not a long time. And then we drained it until we have all our wilted greens here. And I'm just showing you an example. You don't have to do all of them. Pick one. And frozen, like Steph mentioned, this is a good opportunity to use some frozen spinach, some of those frozen greens as well, because it works just as well. So that's going to go into our blender. Beautiful. And I'm going to use some of the liquid that I cooked it in as well. So we'll do about a ladle's worth, and we'll see where that goes. Some of that nice hot liquid. And then I'm also cooking the pasta in that same liquid as well. So not throwing it out, using it all the way through. I'm going to add some juice of a lemon. And this acidity is going to really help to enhance the flavor of the greens. So we often think of salt as adding flavor or flavor enhancer. Acidity does the exact same thing. So things like vinegar, lemon juice, lime juice, those all help to enhance the flavor of whatever you add it to. Then we're also going to add some almonds. And these are just blanched almonds. You can use cashews. If you want to soak them, they actually come out even softer and creamier. So if you don't soak them, you can still use it. It's like making a nice little rustic pesto. But if you want them softer, just soak them. And if you can't do nuts, I've actually done this with silken tofu, and it comes out really, really, really nice. Really nice and creamy. And then plus you're getting more protein from that tofu too, right, Steph?
Yeah. And I will also say that for a lot of people, nuts, I was chatting with a little earlier, we were discussing how nuts, because they have higher fiber, they just don't, they're not as well tolerated. So yeah, an alternative such as like a softer tofu is a great option. Or sometimes like having like a nut butter or seed butter, because those fiber pieces are away. So not like a crunchy peanut butter, but a smooth one. I mean, in this dish, I don't know if there would be like I guess you could put like almond butter, right?
Yeah. Cashew butter, almond butter. And then the last thing, and again, this is optional as well. This is just garlic, okay? And I'm just going to grate a little bit in. But if garlic doesn't sit well with you, obviously you don't have to add it. And this is a massive clove. So if you like garlic, you can add the whole thing. I'm going half. All right, and that is it. So we're going to blend this up now into our sauce. And then by the time this is done, our pasta will be done, and we'll dress it. So fairly simple. Oh, I'm going to actually mute myself so I don't blow out everyone's eardrums.
So while he's doing that, maybe I'll just jump in quickly and mention a little bit about Bladder Cancer Canada. And you can find information at bladdercancercanada.org. But the website has a ton of resources for people that are newly diagnosed. And I remember when I was newly diagnosed, I had nowhere to turn. And the worst thing you can do is start Googling things. But I find that if you go to a place like bladdercancercanada.org, where everything has been curated, and there are guidebooks and web resources, and we have an online forum where people can ask questions. It just gives you some more relatable information. And the big message as well too is because I know your audience are not all made up of bladder cancer patients, but early detection is key. So if you see any red in your urine, it does merit a visit to the doctor. Don't ignore it, because early detection can be really important to fighting bladder cancer.
Sauce is tasty.
Like the green monster.
Yeah, really nice and creamy. Our pasta is done and drained. And again, you don't have to make, say it again, you don't have to make it from scratch, but you have some time on your hands. We're gonna pour in, and this sauce freezes really, really well. So you can also pop this into the freezer, leftover.
Yeah, it's always great to do that batch cooking, to have things on hand, especially when you're experiencing fatigue, feeling really, really tired. It's always good to have like things in the freezer that you could just grab and go. So, you know, if you're making the effort and a mess in the kitchen, might as well, you know, make a little bit more so that you could have that frozen.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was delicious.
Yeah, stir to coat it. And again, from those like the almonds, and I also, as I was blending, I did add a couple tablespoons of olive oil.
Okay.
As I was blending, and that just helps to thicken up the sauce. There's a lot of water that comes out of the greens, so just adding a little bit of olive oil will help create this really nice thick sauce. And that is it. We're gonna finish this with just a little bit of parm. We have to add a little bit on top.
Yeah, and I know that actually taste changes can also be a factor, you know, during treatment. So, you know, really focusing on flavoring your foods with herbs or spices is beneficial. And for sure, Parmesan is one of those that kind of goes a long way, especially when you're experiencing, you know, a bland taste. So it's good.
That's our homemade cavatelli with our greens sauce. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.